There we go. Now we got audio. I'm so sorry. You don't have to type and tell me the audio's not working. I know it's not. It's good now. Listen, I am Joe Edelman, I think. Welcome to The Last Frame Live. I've got a little photo news tonight. I am going to do a shot breakdown of the cover image. So yes, David, it's the cover image. And of course, the Last Frame Q&A. So seriously, start typing. It's your hour. What do you want to talk about in the next 60 minutes? What's on your mind? What are you struggling with? What can I help you with? Because otherwise you might be stuck listening to my opinions for 60 minutes and that would suck, right? Listen, if you're watching live, you know the drill. Please leave me a note in the chat. Let me know who you are and where you're watching from. And if you're watching the replay, no worries. Just drop a comment in the chat. Let me know you were here because I do keep attendance. Already, let's see, I got Ron here from Down Under, so happy Thursday, Ron. We got Robert here from New Mexico, Lynn in New York. Sean gets the award for sound. There you go. Alvin in Virginia. I got TC in Mobile, Alabama. John in Harrisburg. Keith in Virginia. Dusty in Toronto. Luis in Tijuana, Mexico. Let's see, who else we got here? We got Calvin up in Maine, Jim in Maine too. Wow, you guys are like buddies up there. Got here early too. Joe out in California, Alan in Denmark, David in San Diego. Man, we got people all over the place. So the cool part is all of you, honestly, Louis in the Philippines, all of you are part of a growing worldwide community of photographers in over 100 countries who tune in to watch The Last Frame every week. And for that, I'm gonna work really hard to help you with your photography in the next 60 minutes and hopefully with sound. You know what would help a lot more people find out about The Last Frame? If you could do me a solid, hit that thumbs up below the video. The more thumbs up, the more YouTube recommends the show to other photographers. And of course, while you're down there, feel free to go ahead and hit that share button. Let your photography friends know that we are streaming live on YouTube right now. Facebook, Twitter, they're usually the fastest ways to get the word out in real time, all right? So, you know, moral dilemma. I was putting all my notes together. Olympus dropped a new lens today. Looks interesting, 90mm Pro macro lens. It's got some really cool features to it. Canon's got a new entry-level camera that actually looks like a pretty sweet little camera. Bunch of lenses. Hasselblad moved their service center. Leica dropped 2 new lenses like anybody cares. What's that affect? 3 people on the planet? Anyway, you know what? I gotta stick to my guns and I gotta be me. I don't give a damn about this gear stuff. So we're not gonna talk about gear. What I am going to share with you, one piece of photography news, right? Last week, I shared with you the Travel Photographer of the Year awards. And I framed that discussion around the fact that I wanted you to look at those images and I wanted you to notice how clean those images were. When I say clean, I don't mean in terms of noise or anything like that. No, I just mean in terms of the elements in the image. When you looked at those images, the elements were clear. They were, you know, immediately you were drawn to the subject. They were lacking distractions, right? So Petapixel, and possibly the other blogs, but I saw it on Petapixel, they also dropped an article today. Sony released their Sony Awards showcase images from all around the world. And look, I'm not pimping Sony. I don't care who took the pictures, right? But I want to continue that piece of the conversation and the theme because I really want to drive this home to you folks this year. I've been talking a lot lately, and I have a class that I teach. It'll be coming up later through my website later in the year about practical composition. So it is literally a no rules approach to composition. And I gotta tell you, that's exactly what you see when you see these images that we all look at and say, whoa, these images that are winning awards, right? As you go through these Sony images, they are gorgeous. I'm not talking about noise or sharpness, no camera stuff. I'm talking about just the visual elements, the placement, the way the images are composed, the way they're set up. I actually love the fact that a lot of the images have very, very unique color palettes to them. With people, there's a clear connection with the people. Just absolutely interesting, great use of space, negative space in an image, but the simplicity, right? The straight up simplicity of the images. This is something, even in a creative shot, right? We've got some motion blur there, which, may or may not be your cup of tea. It doesn't matter. The simplicity of the image is really, really well done. So, I point this stuff out to all of you, and I'm going to go ahead and share this link. And the point is really simple, okay? I would really, really encourage all of you to spend a little bit of time and look at images like this. Not the crap that's coming through your Instagram feed and your Facebook feed every day, right? Or the crap that you see on, TikTok. No, I'm talking about the images that, these photographers, they're going through the process. They're being recognized as excellent images. And they are. All of these images are excellent images, right? There's a lot to be learned. And again, I'm not saying that you should look at them from the standpoint of, well, I should do it this way, and this way, and I'm going to have an excellent image. No. But look at the images and ask yourself a simple set of questions. Why am I drawn to that image? What makes that image visually interesting? Why do I think that image may have won an award? It's not about being right or wrong. It's not even that you have to know a specific answer. Many times you can figure it out, but it's a matter of taking the time to actually go through that process. And so my whole thing about practical composition, the key to practical composition, it's subject-driven composition, right? Instead of having rules, I operate by 3 guidelines. I've done this my entire career, since I was a teenager. What drives my composition, are 3 things. Why am I taking the shot? What is my subject matter? And what is the emotion that I want people to feel when they look at that photograph? From that point on, every decision is held accountable to those 3 answers. No rules, none of that crap, ever. So, just saying, here's your homework. Do the work. It will benefit you. Okay? So that's all the news I'm going to touch on. I'm not going to talk about all that gear stuff like that because honestly, sorry, I really don't care. I will share with you a couple of things coming up. Let me hit the education page here on my website. For those of you that find yourself struggling with creativity, I have a brand new program. I've never presented this program before. February 16th, so that's next Thursday. Mastering Creativity, a deep dive in how to find the cool ideas, okay? And then as we go forward, March 6th, if you're gonna be in Las Vegas, WPPI, I will be doing a Photowalk March 6th, posing without posing, right? So you guys hear me all the time. Pose is a 4-letter word, don't pose. And honestly, pose is the easiest way to make somebody look stiff, uncomfortable, and like they got a stick up their butt, right? Don't pose. I don't care that the word has been used forever in photography. I don't care that there are really well-known photographers teaching you every posing trick, and they're charging you and they're taking your money for it, suckers. It doesn't work. And words like schmize and hold the hoagie, they don't work unless you're 6'5" and a Forber Abercrombie model. Like, let's wake up. So Pose Without Posing is the first time I get the opportunity in person with real people to teach this class. Those of you that are coming to Texas in April, whoops, we lost Texas school there. Let's get Texas school back, that's it. You'll also be able to see the techniques and learn the techniques for a whole week. 4.5 days, and you know what, it's only $750 to be a part of this program. Really, really cool stuff. And then also, I just wanted to mention, in March, I'm also gonna be in Texas, March 17th, that's a Friday night, I am doing my Mastering Creativity in person. So you can actually see me do that presentation there for free. You have to pay if you see me do it online, but you can see it free in person at Precision Camera and Video. And then the next day on the Saturday, Oops, let's see here if I can find the link for that. There is another tie-in to this. Oops. Are they going to give it to me or not? Let me find the link. I'm doing a really cool event with, son of a gun, it's not there. I'll try and find it at the end. The Saturday after this talk, I am going to be doing an event at the Q2 Stadium in Austin, Texas. So that is the soccer stadium for the professional soccer team. And Sony's going to be there. I'm not getting sponsored by Sony. I'm being paid by Precision Camera, so don't worry, I'm not working with Sony. Those of you that get all freaked out, I'm not getting paid by any brands. I have no sponsors, gang. And actually, I'll talk a little bit about that because I've had a few people ask me about that recently. But it's a 2-hour shooting event with a whole bunch of models. We have full run of the stadium, and it's a really, really cool stadium. Very modern and contemporary. There'll be some lighting gear to try out so we can do some location lighting. I think there's going to be some Tamron lenses there. I think, gosh, one of the lighting manufacturers, I think it might be Nanlite, that's going to have some lights there for us to use. Cool stuff. So you can get all the links to that on my website. All that information's there. So make sure that you check that out. Okay, so that's the education stuff that's coming up. Oh, and I mentioned the, let me find, here's the Q2 thing. Let's see if this will, there it is. So I'll share this link. Would have helped if I got the right link the first time. There's the link for Q2. Here's the link for Mastering Creativity. Here is the link for Texas School. And so again, these are all in-person events. And then for my virtual events, use this link on my website, and you'll see that, where are we at here? If I scroll on down, in May, here it is, your May 9th, your No Rules Composition Techniques to Improve Your Photography. And that's a deep dive into what I just explained to you a few minutes ago. And there's others coming up as the year goes on. Okay? All right, so that is that piece. Now, let me go ahead and reset here, and let's take a look at a shot breakdown really quick in terms of how I did this shot. In fact, I'm going to share it with you off of Facebook, okay? So this is the cover shot for tonight's last frame. If you follow me on Instagram, you hopefully would have also seen this. And by the way, for those of you that don't know, my Instagram, every post on my Instagram, if you swipe, it's a lesson. There are lighting diagrams. There are, in some cases, behind-the-scenes photos or behind-the-scenes video clips even. There's a gear list. All the tech information is there. So check them out, right? There's little mini lessons there. They're not going to take you a long time to go through. So first of all, let me give you kind of inspiration for this and what this was all about and why I did this shot. I have been dabbling for a while, on and off, if you've been paying attention, with the concept of digital makeup. Now, the initial attempts that I did were much more dramatic and more bold, where I was basically taking patterns and textures and things like that and kind of laying it over a face and shaping and blending properly and making sure the face still had skin texture and that. But I wanted to start to evolve to a little bit more of just kind of day-to-day makeup, if you will, beauty type makeup. So the way that I'm doing these shots is having the model, and this is like, one of my cardinal rules that I've preached for a long, long time. The technology's come a long way. It's catching up, right? The idea that you really should work with a makeup artist, and you should. Honestly, it's still the easiest, still the best way to do it. However, sometimes the budget doesn't allow for that, right? So I'll tell you straight up before you get too excited, this requires a lot of time and patience. It requires some advanced Photoshop skills, which can all be learned. And I also do a little bit of this work in the software Portrait Pro. Now, some of you that are familiar with Portrait Pro might realize, oh, there's a whole makeup section in there where you can apply makeup. Ugh. I'm not a big fan of that. So that's actually not what I'm using Portrait Pro for. I use Portrait Pro for a little bit of shaping tools that are in it, and that's it. Like, that's the only thing that I touch it for. I'm not using that to do the makeup piece. Sorry. And actually, Portrait Pro is actually really good at cleaning up the whites of the eyes, like super fast, and not making it look overdone or fake. So I have been using that a little bit more recently because it's kind of a quick step. I can use Portrait Pro as a plugin to Photoshop, and it's going to come in non-destructive. So, you know, that's all ideal. So in this particular case, I wanted to kind of go the opposite direction of the shots where I had done the, you know, super extreme makeup overlays, and do kind of more of a real makeup look, right? So let's just actually break down the image first. So one of the things that you're gonna see me show from this point forward, whenever I can, when I'm doing my shots that I share with you. And in this case, I went back and I did it with the mannequin because I had thought about doing it, forgot to do it. So I thought, all right, fine. I'm gonna go do it on the mannequin so I can at least show you the breakdown. So I wanted to show you what each of the lights in this shot are doing, because part of the challenge here, excuse me, sorry. Part of the challenge here is I've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lights in play in this shot, right? Which, that's a bit of a reach for a lot of you, and that's okay. But I want to also show you a way that makes it a lot easier the first time you might play with something like this to be able to figure out how to make it work well. So obviously there's a background light that is hidden behind the model aimed at a black background. And I'll show you the lighting diagram momentarily to create the glow, right? And I've adopted this working methodology for myself because I teach it this way now, and it's easier. When I set up these shots, literally, you know, I decided basically how do I want to light it in my head in terms of how am I seeing this, right? I knew that I was going to have my key light directly in, you know, front of my subject and up. I knew that I wanted the yellow rims. I thought about the idea of using the orange accent, and I knew I was going to use teal in the background. So once I had that in my head, instead of starting with my key light, which is what I've done my entire career, because that's how I was taught, I actually started with the background light. So I built this shot in this order: background, then accent, then rim light. So it's a matter of turning on that teal light, setting it up, turning it on, and doing test shots until I get it just right. By the way, I also determined my exposure in advance. Remember, I'm in a studio, right? So there's no reason for me to not shoot at base ISO. I'm using strobes. There's no reason for me to not shoot at 1/250th of a second, because that is the sync speed for my camera, right? And I prefer to shoot at f7.1, f8 for my aperture when I'm in the studio. So all of that I know before I even get started, right? So instead of setting up lights and then figuring out what's the exposure, I'm figuring out the exposure first, and then I'm adjusting the lights to meet that exposure. For you portrait shooters, for anybody that wants to do this kind of work, for any of you working with models, I strongly encourage you to do it that way. For several reasons. Number one, before you do anything, you're making sure that you've got settings that are going to stop your action, that are going to keep everything in focus, that are going to give you the look that you want in that studio setting. Number two, this process is a tiny bit slower. Look, I've been lighting for, 40 some years at this point. I could set up a lighting arrangement like this very quickly if I needed to, but that doesn't make it good. In fact, all that does is it leaves me prone to making mistakes. So instead, I'm going to do my background light first, and I'm going to get the feel of that light that I want. And then I turned that light off. Then I went to my accent light, which is placed directly in front of the background light, but aimed back towards the camera so that I could get a little bit of color in the material that's kind of like a netting, right? And I adjusted the power of that light until it fit with the exposure and look that I have in mind. I wanted to be sure that I could see detail all through the material. I didn't want it to get so bright that it was going to become the brightest part of the picture and take attention away from the subject's face. Then I turned that off. Then I turned my rim lights on. I needed to do two things with the rim lights. One, I had to adjust them so they were hitting the face evenly front to back, and then I had to adjust the power so that I got the look that I wanted. It was important for me, in this case, two things that I wanted. One, I did not want them to be exactly the same brightness. I wanted a little difference, but I also did not, the second thing, did not want to lose any detail in the skin. So you'll notice camera left is ever so slightly brighter than camera right. You can also see that on the mannequin, right? So that is intentional. That was planned. Why would I do that? Well, in this case, I've got my subject looking straight at the camera. So I'm creating some symmetry, and I did do one little Photoshop cheat with the symmetry, which I'll show you in a minute. And no, it's not her face. I didn't flip her face. That's her face, right? Okay. So anytime I'm going to do something like that, I want to make sure there are some things that offset it for the human brain so that somebody doesn't look at it and immediately pick up, oh, it's completely symmetrical. Because even if they think, it's not symmetrical, did Joe flip it? There's intentionally a lot of things in this image to throw you off the scent. And I'll show you what they are momentarily, right? So that, honestly, that was the main reason why I didn't want them exactly the same. I wanted them close. And so then turn the rim lights off and then turn the key light on, fine-tune the placement of the key light, fine-tune the power of the key light so that I am getting the exact look. Them all back on and do my shot. These are the two stock photos that I purchased to create the background overlay to add the texture because, you know, as you can see, it's cool with the color, but it's really kind of boring. Right? So from the get-go, I fully intended to work with textures. I won't lie to you, since I was kind of experimenting with this shot, I broke one of my own rules. That rule being that I always prefer to have the backgrounds. If I'm going to composite in a background or composite in multiple images to create a background, I prefer to have them on a computer in the studio when I'm shooting. That way I have a much higher degree of confidence that it's all going to work and look good together. This shot actually came from a session where I brought this young lady and she's local to me and I told her, hey, I'm experimenting. She spent most of the time she was in my studio that day on her phone with my permission, sitting on a stool, and every so often I would tell her, okay, look up. She'd go back to her phone, okay, look up, and I'd take a shot. And then when I thought, okay, you know what, I've got an idea here and it's going to work out, then it was like, okay, now I need you to put the phone down. And I did the styling and we actually created an image that I then built the makeup on top of. So actually, just to talk about the makeup before I go on, simple makeup, obviously lips, some contouring of the face. She did her own makeup when she left the house. It was very nice makeup, but it's basically pretty makeup that a girl would put on maybe to go out, right? She had no eyeshadow, no shade or color on the top. I didn't want to make a dramatic statement, especially because I was using a color that I'm not a fan of. Green is one of the colors that I don't like that much, never have. So given the teal makeup, I wanted to go kind of teal green for the eyeshadow so that I knew that I was going to keep it very subtle, but that's what we have. So makeup is primarily lips, contouring and shaping, and the eyeshadow, right? So again, as I showed you, the two images combined, I'll show you the full image in a minute so you'll be able to see those a little bit better. One to get texture, one to get a little bit of the bokeh, but I didn't want it to be a bokeh background. So I actually really dialed down the bokeh image a lot, okay? And here's the setup. So Cooley, you're asking all about 8200s. There's what it is, okay? So the key light is an 8300. An 8200 would work just fine. So let's be really clear, right? It would work just fine. But I had an AD300 in there. And the only reason I had that in there is because it's already got the round tube and I'm putting it in a round modifier. It's going to fill the box a little quicker, a little easier. That's it. It's the only reason. I could have put a bare bulb 8200 in there. It would have worked fine. For my modifier, I used the Photowalk Ronnie 285 centimeter, which is 33 inches. Awesome size, even better yet, it's a very shallow box. You can see it's not very deep. For the background, well, let's start with rims. There's the two rims on either side. There's the orange light just slightly below. If I would have brought it up so that it was actually in the camera lane, it would have been almost impossible to not have those holes blow out. So really what I was doing by having it a little bit lower is I was lighting the top edges of the holes in the netting, right? So as we go back and we look, right, I'm putting the light on the top edges of this netting. Because again, I just wanted to be a subtle color accent. This was one of those lights, we totally could have done away with this. It didn't have to be there. I was being a little bit of a lighting nerd and decided, you know what? I want to add one more color in to stretch the color palette just a little. I just came back from Imaging USA where I did my big talk on color, and so it was kind of top of mind. So it's like, yeah, I'm gonna put that subtle color accent in. That's why it's there. So there's the setup. There's the gear list. It was shot on the A7R 4A, which my experiment with that camera, by the way, is just about done. 61 megapixels is like ridiculous. It just is. I'll probably just be working with the A7 IVs, maybe an A7 V, we'll see. But 61 megapixels, there's no reason for me to justify it at all. But I've done it, shown you all. The pictures don't look any different than when I shot with Olympus, for that matter. Tamron 70 to 180, I'm absolutely in love with this lens. So I had the 4 Godox 8200 strobes, all of which were behind her. 1 Godox 8300, the Photowalk Ronnie. The Magma gels were 1 teal, 2 yellow, 1 orange, and then the Savage number 20 black seamless paper background. Okay. Coolly, no, I showed you the picture, man. No bare bulb. No, it's got gel. Why would I use a bare bulb for that accent light? Because it would light my background. It would light the whole damn room if I used a bare bulb, right? I explained the whole point behind the accent light was just to light this. So working with a bare bulb would be counterproductive because it would be throwing light everywhere. Plus, it's a lot harder to gel a bare bulb. It's not impossible, but it's a lot harder. There's no easy way to gel a bare bulb. With the Fresnel head aimed, all I'm doing is slapping a Magma on there. Boom, done. Super simple, right? Never make things harder than they need to be. Like, honestly, that's the thing. Part of your learning curve, folks, always should be keep it super simple, right? We used to say keep it simple, stupid. That's not politically correct these days. So we'll make sure it's, politically correct, right? Keep it super simple. No reason to ever, overdo it. That's why I'm kind of owning the fact that orange, that's not really keeping it super simple. That was just me nerding out and let's throw one more color in there for a real subtle accent. And again, look at how much you see of that color in a finished shot. Not a lot. So I'm not exaggerating when I would say, that was being a bit extravagant and, looking for a subtle color. But if I go back actually to full image, you could see it just ever so slightly is adding another accent into the shot. And subtlety in lighting is a beautiful thing when you get it to come together right. Okay. So let's see, what else did we have here? Yeah, so the lighting diagrams, I have them. Let me switch over. So, here's the 3D version of it. But basically, what I wanted to go ahead and show you guys to give you a sense of space, okay? You could have done this shot, or I could have done this shot in a 10-foot diameter circle. That green circle, right, is 10 feet in diameter. In my case, I had the background just a little bit more than 5 feet away, but I could move the background up and I could adjust these lights ever so slightly and still pull it off into 10 feet, right? So it's completely doable. You don't need a ton of space for these kind of shots to work at all. You can do it in a fairly small space. And that's also a big part of my point as to why you guys hear me say over and over and over again, you don't need 600-watt strobes. Even when you're outside in daylight, you don't need 600-watt strobes. So, it's a lot easier to work with smaller strobes. They take up less space. You can use them at closer distances, and they're not going to overpower what you're doing and force you to have to shoot at like f/22 for everything, which is definitely not ideal, right? Because it's not the sharpest part of your lens. You do run the risk of diffraction depending on, how you have things set up. So, Art Within. This software is called Set Alight 3D. But since you don't know what it is, I have to give you my standard warning, okay? I'll Google it for you in just a second and I'll get you a link. But here's the standard warning. I want you to imagine the very first time that you ever opened up Lightroom or Photoshop. When it came onto your screen and you just kind of did that, whoa, right? It's that, what have I gotten myself into? Okay. This is very cool software. It has a learning curve. And here's the important part. It is not a substitute for picking up your camera, turning on your damn lights, and putting somebody in front of the camera and taking bad pictures. It is not a substitute. Okay? So, yes, I love it. It's a great teaching tool. Do I imagine my pictures and then come to the software and plan them out and go shoot them? Hell no, man. That's like an extra step. Why do I want to do that? Could you? There are people that do that. Let me be really clear, right? You could, but no. So I will tell you though, Art, if you join my community, you can get a 15% discount on it. I don't make any money on it. It's not an affiliate link. I happen to know that people are in Germany who make the software. I was one of the first people to talk about this software on YouTube and publicly. It is amazing. It's absolutely amazing software. Very powerful. A lot of great potential. In my Tog Knowledge community, folks, I share the set files. They're called set.set files from this. So for anybody that has the software, when I share a new image, they can download my set file and work with it. Okay. But yeah, I'll get you the link before we're done here. But the last piece of my advice, Art, number one, there's a free trial. So download the free trial and try it out before you buy it, so that you're not wasting your money on something that's going to overwhelm you, because it will take you some time to learn it and to actually be able to use it functionally. Number two, there are two versions of it. There's a basic version and there is a studio version. You do not need the studio version unless you're going to start doing photo education like me and that kind of stuff. And even then, I don't use 90% of the features that are in the studio version. There's just really not a benefit to it for me. So, yeah, so I hate to sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. You know, I love it, but you shouldn't buy it right away. But I love it, and you shouldn't buy it right away. Try it out. Make sure that it's for you, because I don't want to see you run out and spend money and then not use the software. So bear with me 1 second. I'll get you the link here. And all right, so I'll drop the link in the chat. There you go. Okay. All right, so I saw some questions came in. This is good. Otherwise, we'd have a really short show tonight. So let me go ahead and scroll them. Actually, we'll take them from the end, and I'll work backwards again. Eric, I tried using that software a while ago. About an hour later, I just stood up and set my lights and tested my idea that way. They're definitely a learning curve. And yeah, that's the thing, right? So it's just a matter of understand what you're getting, right, when you get into it. Again, I think it's amazing. Absolutely amazing. But remember how I'm using it, right? I'm using it to teach and to share what I do. For me, the way my brain works, the whole idea of like plan it out, map it out, and then go try to replicate that in the studio. Now, because I will tell you, folks, for those of you that have never used it, like you can actually work your exposures out in this software So like if you, here, let me go back to it. If you notice up in the top, and it's going to be kind of small on the YouTube screen, sorry, but all the way up the top of the picture above me, right, where my mouse is, there's the exposure settings, right? 250th second, 7.1, ISO 100. So, and it's properly exposed. I can set my exposures or figure out my exposures based on using a 200 watt second flash, which is what my key light is. Right, whoops. Let's go back to that. So, you know, it's over here is the Godox 8200, 200 watt second flash. I can set my exposures up, and then when I go into the studio to take those pictures, I could, in theory, use the same exact exposure settings, and it's going to work. This software is extremely powerful and extremely accurate. Okay? All right, so some other questions here. Joe's Photography. You might have talked about it in an older video, but when or why might you need a strobe more powerful than the 8200 or 300? So, all right, let me take all the rhetoric out and my bullying about buying 600 watt strobes, right? There are photographers who need, like legit need, a 600 watt strobe. A great example would be an architectural photographer who shoots at night and who needs to light a building. A photographer that needs to go into a gymnasium and rig lights in the ceiling, which I've done in the past, to be able to light a basketball court like it's a studio setting, or light a hockey rink like it's a studio setting. The lights are going to be 30 to 40 feet away from the subjects. So in those situations, not only do you need much, much more powerful strobes, but you're also going to use long throw reflectors, which are the highly reflective, deep reflectors that really throw the light. The light's still going to spread plenty by the time it gets to the court or the ice rink. But those deep, long reflectors focus as much of it forward so that you're getting as much impact as possible out of it. When you're shooting portraits or shooting models, you know, your lights are usually anywhere from like 3 feet to 10 feet away. 200, 300 watt seconds is more than enough. And, you know, the whole bit about overpowering the sun outside at high noon, well, so number one, you know, it's an odd phrase because we can't overpower the sun. There are no strobes that are brighter than the sun, right? But in theory, we're creating a shot where we can make the background look dark and we're making the subject look brighter in the foreground. The idea that you need 600 watt seconds to do that is honestly a lazy approach to photography. Now, let me explain, right? And if you're one of those people, you're still not going to like it, but let me explain why it's lazy. This idea of having the subject brighter than the background outdoors, photographers in the last 10 years or so, they think that, you know, they kind of invented this and this is like a cool new thing. We were doing the same technique back in the early 1980s with speed lights that were a fraction of the power of the strobes that we're using today. And when I say of the strobes we're using today, I mean a fraction of the power of a 200 watt second strobe. So how did we do that? It's simple. We looked for some shade, and that's where we did the shot. So the only thing you're gaining with a 600 watt second strobe is that you can take the picture with a shitty background and make the background go away, which means you're lazy, which means you're just looking to not have to do your job. I mean, how is it for decades photographers took amazing outdoor portraits without 600 watt seconds? You see my point? So the additional reason why I do bully people about it, this is it right here. It's not creative. Anytime everybody's doing it, I'm sorry, but I think you're lazy and an idiot if you do it. Because the same photographers that are out there doing that, that are out there shooting that 600 watt second strobe and overpowering the sun, they're the same photographers that if you have a business conversation with them, like, oh, yeah, man, it sucks. Competition is so horrible because everybody's got cameras today. Everybody thinks that it should be free because they can do it with their phone. Like, I just don't understand. And they're the ones that are out there pissing and moaning. Well, they're pissing and moaning because their work is the same as everybody else's. That's why they have competition. competition, you've heard me say this before, competition is a choice. It's a choice. Don't choose it. Problem solved. Right? So that's another reason why you don't need a 600 watt second stroke. So, David, for the how I got the shot photo, it looks like the model is leaning forward towards the camera. Simply curious. A little bit, just like you see in my diagram here. Yes, she is slightly forward. Okay. Obviously, going back to that image, there is nothing about this image that is, kind of a traditional portrait. So I'm certainly not going to do, a traditional stick up your butt portrait pose, right? It's meant to be different. It's meant to be engaging. I also want you all to notice very carefully, there's a lot of different tones and ranges in this image. There's the brighter background with the glow and everything, but where's the brightest part of the image? It's this part of her face right here. It's right where the action's at. That's the brightest part of the image. Even the rim lights coming in are not brighter than her image, than the front of her face. That, I won't lie, I'm not tooting my own horn, but I'm actually really proud of the lighting in this one. It's a perfect balance of subtlety across the board, right? This is a great example of using light to create composition. It's an example of using light to force the viewer, you folks, to look exactly where I want you to look. Because the first time you looked at this image, you looked right at the middle of her face. You've been staring at it long enough now, you've looked at the beaded collar thing and all that stuff, but you looked right at her face, okay? So everything in this image is designed to get you to view the image the way I want you to view it, because I'm a nerd and because I find that really interesting to try and do. But this is an example of using light for composition. There's negative space in the image. There is the glow, which alongside the diagonal lines brings all the attention to the face, and the face holds that attention because it's the brightest part of the image, and those eyes, you have to interact with the eyes. You don't have a choice when you look at the photo. So, yeah, that's how it's put together. And, if you go and look through my portfolio, I do that a lot. That's just something for me that I would enjoy, because one, it kind of furthers the fantasy, right? You are face to face with an incredibly beautiful human being, and you have no choice but to engage and interact with them because they're staring right back at you. So that's a big part of why I like to do that. Okay. So going back up here, there were more questions. Let's see. Eric about the software. We did that one. Luis, off topic. That's okay. What else can I tell a customer? I'm sorry, Eric. Luis, I actually love these kind of questions. What else can I tell a customer that I want to lose? This lady hires us for every family event she has, mostly boring events that are kind of far away from us. He also went on to say he's used the "we're busy" and charging more than normal. Gosh, Luis, I think what I would do is kind of go the extra mile, which does run the risk of the woman loving you even more. I'm not going to lie, but it also sets the bar for your reputation very high in the event that she would ever talk about what I'm about to suggest. So if you're not wanting to deal with her, the next time that she would reach out to you, I would indeed use the same concept as I'm busy, but what you might want to say is, hey, unfortunately, I'm taking some time off, or I have some personal things that I'm taking care of. I'm not going to be available for a while, so that she's not going to be able to say, well, I can do it the next week, right? But we're not done. What you're going to do then is say, however, there is a photographer that I can recommend to you who I believe will be a great fit, does similar work, and will be able to take care of you in my absence. And you are going to recommend, and this is a sincere recommendation, so I don't mean you're just like throwing her over the wall, because hopefully if you are a working photographer that's doing portraits and family portraits and events, you have already built a network locally so that when somebody does contact you and says, hey, I need it on this day, and you can't, you're not just going to say, hey, I'm sorry, I'm booked. You're going to say, gosh, I'd love to do it, but unfortunately I'm already booked. I do, however, have someone who can take care of you. And then you are not just going to give them a name and a phone number and say good luck. You're actually going to put them in touch with that person. So if you're meeting that potential client in person, you're going to pick up the phone in front of them and make the call and hand them the phone and make an introduction. If you're doing this online, you are going to send an email to both of them, right? So you're going to put them both together in an email thread and do an email introduction and explain to the other photographer on behalf of the client that they need a photographer for a family portrait on such and such a date, and explain to the client that this photographer is someone that you know and you trust and confident that you can help them, and then you butt out of it. Depending on just how much of a pain in the butt this lady is, I mean, that's a risk even passing her off to someone in your network because you might upset them. But yeah, I think every photographer that I've ever known who has been in business for any period of time has always had kind of that one nightmare client that, you get to a point where you have two choices. You either suck it up and deal with it. And, you do everything you can to try and eliminate some of it. Like Eric, I don't know why Eric took his message back, but he said about, raise the prices. And you also mentioned you've already tried raising the price. Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it. You raise the prices. But even then, you got to be careful. Because if you raise your prices too high and she mentions it to other people, she's potentially becoming bad advertising for you, right? Oh, he's too expensive. So you wind up in a situation where like you either just kind of continue to take it, or if you're like me, and this is by no means what I am encouraging any of you to do, I just don't have that kind of patience. I mean, I will go to a point with anyone, and then you might have guessed, since I don't have a lot of filters, I finally get to a point where it's like, that's it. I'm sorry, but I'm not dealing with you anymore. We need to part ways, and you need to go elsewhere. And, the one thing I have done in my career, which again, it's not for everybody. So let me be clear. I am not encouraging any of you to do this. And I am telling you that if you do adopt this kind of philosophy, you better be prepared for the grief that goes with it, and you better make sure you're on the right side of history when you do it. I've always been the kind of person, life is too short. I would rather walk away from somebody and have them pissed at me for that, or for that matter, be a pain in the butt to somebody to make sure that the end result is going to be excellent, as opposed to having a difficult client and having them make my job impossible, and then me doing a less than excellent job. And then I have a situation where I got paid for a less than excellent job. I have a client who's going to show less than excellent work of mine, and they're going to tell people that I did less than excellent. I'd rather walk away with the images being excellent and the client saying he's a pain in the ass. Because if your images are excellent, people will tolerate you being a pain in the ass. Right? So it's all about balance, unfortunately. That's the challenge. Not a super easy answer there, Luis. But I wish you luck with them. So here, scrolling on back. Yeah, Eric, my normal Instagram profile. Sorry, here, let me get that for you. It's basically just, it's a username Joe Edelman, but I'll type it out for you so that you can have it. Make sure I spelled that right. Yes, I did. So there you go. Everything's there that's the Instagram profile. And the good part of it is I don't even post every week. I usually post once a month if you're lucky, but each post is a lesson. Okay. I know some of you are shocked. Like, well, you don't post like 3 times a week. And no, I post when I have a good lesson to share. And that's all you're going to find there. Okay. Let's see, scrolling on back here. I saw there was some other stuff earlier. Patrick, I have a neutral gray background. I'm shooting in a small space and find it harder to get my background to change to red or blue. Any tips? My lights are 8400 Pros and an 8200 Pro. Patrick, it sounds like what you're doing is you're, number one, either overpowering your lights, using them at too high power, or two, you're not actually controlling and modifying them, meaning if you're in a tight space, one of the things that you have to do with a gray background, if you want that color to be rich, you've got to be able to prevent your key lights and any other lights from hitting the background, right? And no, grids are not always the answer, because remember, grids on a key light are also going to impact the way the light looks on your subject. So it's not necessarily before somebody starts saying, hey, put a grid on it, that's what I do. It's not as simple as putting a grid on it. A grid impacts the quality of your light. It doesn't just stop it from hitting something, right? If you want to stop light from hitting something, you're actually better off flagging it, not gridding it. Flagging it is simply putting something between the light and the background to stop the light from hitting the background. So it sounds, honestly, if you're not able to get rich colors, that's the problem. You've got too much white light hitting the gray background. So, or you are, the only other option is when you are putting your gels on that gray background, you're just simply overpowering them. You need to turn them down. It's going to be one of those two things. The 10-foot circle that you see me working with, you should be able to do it with a 10-foot circle. You're not going to be able to get that gray background black before you put the color on it, but you'll be able to get it a very, very, very dark gray. So you can still get very rich colors. But if you overexpose them, or if your key light's also lighting the background, then that's a problem. Easiest way to test that, set your key light up first. So we're going to reverse what I showed you earlier for the test. Set your key light up first. Make sure your background's set up, and get your exposure dialed in with your key light, and just look at the frame. If the background is a medium or a light gray in your frame, not in real life, in your frame, then you're not going to get rich color out of that background. It's not going to happen. That's because you're getting too much light coming from your key light. Okay. Josh, what are your personal keys to adding 3D pop to an image? So, I mean, if you're talking kind of like, you know, this type of thing with my images, it's all about light and shadow, Josh. And that's, you know, again, gang, this is where you make your work stand out. And this is why I give so many of you so much grief about, you know, following all these trends. And let's go overpower the sun and get that latest Kodak strobe, go buy that new Sony camera, all this, instead of actually worrying about the stuff that makes a difference in your photography, right? You've all seen me do this for 5 years with Olympus. You're seeing me do it now, you know, at the opposite end of the spectrum with a 61 megapixel Sony, and the pictures still look the same. It's lighting and exposure. It's the physics. The physics makes the pop. So in this case, Josh, if you look, it's actually, this is a great image to kind of break it down, right? The depth comes because the light hits right in here, almost like it's a small circle, and it falls off very quickly. But then I've added other light in to help create shape and more of a feeling of depth. I added the glow in the background, which creates a feeling of distance and depth. Okay, even without the texture, you still get the feeling of distance and depth. So you're creating that with light. David earlier asked about, like, why do I have her leaning forward? Well, in a normal portrait, you definitely wouldn't want to do that, right? But in something like this, I wanted the feel to be like that model was literally coming towards the camera. Why? Because it looks interesting. And for exactly the same reason that some of you asked about it, none of this is real, right? This is just some crazy fantasy. So part of what also gets people to spend more time looking at these pictures is I'm not trying to create a specific character, right? You know, there's pieces of it that, you know, especially the material, which is not metal, it's cloth, but almost looks like chainmail, right? But then you've got the beaded thing, which that kind of doesn't fit with chainmail. And so it's like, it's this mix of things that actually force people to look at it and consider it. But it's got to be done in a way that it also looks like it fits together, right? That's kind of the beauty of it. So it's not only taking the pieces, but then creating a color scheme that works with it and kind of ties it all together, right? But that's where the pop comes. It's using your light to create depth. If you're new to kind of the whole lighting thing, Josh, I would encourage you to go back to my YouTube channel. Number one, there's a ton of videos about lighting, but the ones that you're going to want to watch for sure, find the video on the inverse square law on my YouTube channel, because that's basically what this is. This is me using the inverse square law to really get that light kind of focused in and having it fall off really quickly. Okay. So let's see, what else did we have here? All right, that was Patrick. Scrolling back up. Cooley, can you show me an image of the layout of your case for your 8200s? No, I don't. I'm sorry, I don't have one here. But Cooley, I'm almost positive it is in my travel video that I did. So here, bear with me for a second, and I'll see if I can find it for you. Whoops, there we go. And there, travel. Gotta go through the commercials on YouTube first. Here, let me scroll up. You guys can watch the commercials with me. All right, there
if you're like me,
I believe I showed that case in, and yeah, here it is, right here. It has changed ever so slightly.
Stands, modifiers, transmitters, and
let's back it up a tad. So, and I'll share the link to the video in 1 second here. Coolly, turn that off. Get rid of the ad. Yeah, actually, that's not the tall case. Gosh, I did this longer ago than I thought I did. It's similar to that, but I've got a little bit more working room now in the newer case. The newer case is a little bit taller. So the only difference is in the newer case, I've got a set of pouch cases at the top of it that carry transmitters for all the different camera brands, because when I'm doing workshops, people need to be able to fire the flashes, and carries all my tether tools gear, you know, my cables and my tether block. I also do carry a flash meter. Not that I use it a lot, but yeah, that's all in case. But that's basically the layout's the same. It's just that there's extra space at the top. So this video, let me just grab that, is right there. So there's that for you. Let's see. And can you send me a link to my folio? Interested to hear your critical thoughts. No, you can't. I mean, you could send it, but I'm not going to do anything with it. But let me explain. I'm not trying to be a jerk, okay? I'll tell you why. In fact, I'm going to give you 2 things that you need to understand. So bear with me. I'm going to share the link to another video that you can watch later. First of all, I don't believe in critiques. Critiques are old. Critiques are harmful. Critiques are nothing more than opinions. And opinions are like a certain body part. I'm sitting on mine. Everybody's got one. So why do we care, right? Me telling you my opinions of your pictures serves you no use whatsoever. The proper way to get feedback on your photos, which I understand that's what you want, the proper way to get feedback, it requires context. I've just shared a video in the chat. Watch that when we're done. It's called How to Give Constructive Feedback, but it also talks in there about how to ask for constructive feedback. I would encourage you, if you want to learn more about how to do it, sign up. The link is in the description below. Sign up for my Tog Knowledge community. It's a paid community, but you can get a 14-day free trial, right, to try it out, see if it's for you. But the way that we do it in the community, when someone posts an image where they want feedback, they've got to tell me, why did you take the shot? They've got to tell me all the technical specs behind the shot, both camera and lighting. They've got to tell me how they set up their lighting. They've got to, whenever possible, show me behind the scenes images of their lighting setups. They have to tell me, did you accomplish your goal? And even if you did accomplish your goal, if you could go back and do it again, What would you do differently this time? And if they can't answer that last question, they're not allowed to post the picture. Number one, here's why. I can look at every image I have ever taken, and I could tell you what I would change if I went to do it again. And I'm proud of that. That's not a neurotic thing. That's not an anxiety-filled thing. That is part of how I critically self-examine my own work and move myself forward with a goal of growth. So by knowing what you would do to the image if you could do it again, I can go through that image and I can apply my years of experience and tell you, okay, if this is your goal, this is how I would go about doing that. And then, yeah, every now and then there's going to be something that's a glaring thing that's really hurting the image, and you may not have picked up on it or mentioned it, and then I will mention it. But trust me, do not go and ask for critiques. Critiques will not help you at all, okay? And there's a whole bunch of science behind that, I swear. So that's not just my opinion, I promise. Jeremy, just last one here since we're running out of time. Are there resources you would recommend to better understand and apply the inverse square law? You don't apply the inverse square law. You do use it as a tool, but don't think of it as applying it because it's there. It's in every picture. It's there when you're shooting outside. It's there when you're shooting inside, right? So, we're mincing words, but I want to be clear. I will start you with my video, Jeremy, and then, this will actually help you to at least get your head wrapped around it. But here's the trick, right? Once you get your head wrapped around it, don't watch 10 more videos because you're not going to understand it any better. You're not. The way you understand the inverse square law, pick up a camera, pick up a light, and go play with the inverse square law. I don't even know the mathematical equation. It's physics, right? If you ask me, hey, Joe, what's the equation? I have no freaking clue. But if you wanted to show me wanted me to show you everything that I could show you about the inverse square law and how it works, we would need at least 3 hours. And that's from experience, right? So that's what you need to gain. Basic understanding of what it is and how it works, and then you got to go put experience behind that. And that's how you do it. That's where the practice comes in. Okay? All right, gang, look, I got to run. We're at the hour. Awesome questions tonight, folks. Seriously, thank you. Awesome questions. I always prefer to have conversations like this so that I can send you guys out with some resources and some ideas and some things to work on. Next week, I'll have another Behind the Shot. We'll do a breakdown. I'll be here for your questions. So if you're planning to come back next week, you got a whole week. Figure out, what are you working on? What do you need help with? Jeremy, when you do watch that video and you do go play, sign up for the 14-day free trial in my community and post some of the images so we can talk about them. And I'll help push you on to the next level from there, all right? But whatever you do, gang, you know the drill. Go pick up that camera and shoot something because your next shot is your best shot. Do the work, folks. Adios. Take care.